This is Jeff Barta, and I'm interviewing Walter Barta Sr. on Farming with Horses in his home on North Ridge Road, Chesaning, Michigan. This interview is sponsored by the Honors English class at Chesaning High School, and the date is December 30th, 1989. What do you remember about working with a team of horses?
Well, I remember that it was awful slow and tiresome, and it took about as much work to take care of the horses as it did to work with them. And I got about as tired as they did. Things were slow, and sometimes it would rain, you wouldn't have to. They could get rested up. And you never seemed to have enough time to get everything done, slow as they were. About an acre a day is all you could plow.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I'm glad we don't have to do it now. Work with horses.
Okay. What are some of your most memorable experiences with a team of horses?
Well, the time that I really got scared in my life, I was only about 10 years old, and I was cutting hay, and a horse turned his head around to chase the fly off in his back, and he got the strap that holds the back part of his harness in his mouth. It was on the left side, and the horse kept turning left all the time. He couldn't get his mouth loose. The strap was in his mouth. Kept turning around and around and around, and the mowing machine kept going. It's a wonder I wasn't trampled to death. And there seemed to be a lot of bees in the hay, and I don't know if it was the flies or the bees that were bothering the horses. After I got the strap out of his mouth, I said, I never forgot it. One of them kind of experiences is enough.
Anything else you'd like to say about memorable experiences?
Well, there's so many things I don't even remember. I remember one time I got horse stepped on my foot. That only happened once because I made sure it didn't happen again. We had a horse once that was blind on one eye, and he was good for that. He couldn't see, huh? I was always worried about putting harnesses on the horses because I wasn't very big then. They were about as scared of me as I was of them.
What did a harness actually consist of?
Well, you'd start putting the collar on first. That's the pad that they pull against. And then you'd... some people put the collar over the horse's head, but we never did. We always put it over his neck and then buckle it on top. Put the hames over it. The hames was the part that the tugs was fastened to. And it had martingales, back straps, and I don't know. For heavy loads, we'd have a double hame strap on them. Tugs was the most important thing, so you'd have them hooked up even. And sometimes you go down by a new tug and it'd be shorter than the one and then your old tug, because the old tugs were stretched out. And then you had to hook the links up to compensate for the shorter tug. Anything new was bound to stretch out after a while. So,
Anything else?
Harness parts are, I guess if you really want to see, well, you have to look it up in it.
How did you take care of the harnesses?
Well, we always made sure they was hung up properly and well oiled, well adjusted. Sometimes the horses would get loose in the barn and knock the harnesses off the hook and made a mess out of them, but that wasn't very often. Oil in the harness is the main thing if you keep it oiled up good. If you got too much oil in the lines, in the summertime when the sun would be 100, the lines would burn your hands because there was so much oil in the harness. Just like having them on a hot plate. Keep it out of the weather was the main thing.
Anything else?
Well, nothing really that I can think of.
Okay. Good. When working with a team, what exactly did you do?
Well, you done just about everything because you didn't have half a dozen tractors around like you got now. Now you got a tractor for just about every job. Other than that, you had to have a team that would work doing anything, cutting hay, plowing, raking hay, hauling hay. Jack of all trades. A pair of good horses was dependable and they'd do anything for you. You could do anything with horses, same as you can with cultivate. Horses would have to do everything because that's the only way you had to do it. That's about all I can tell you about.
What was the importance of resting a team of horses when working them?
Well, horses are just like a human being. You get tired. That's just like a boxer. He can only go 3 rounds, while a horse is a lot like that because you get tired, you get tired. You get tired doing anything, swimming or running up and down the road or too much of anything, you get tired of it. Horses had to be well rested and taken care of. And you could tell if they were overworked or not. They begin to really slow down. You tell that it's time to say whoa and let them get their wind. It all depends how hot it was. If you overworked them and misused them, that was just throwing money away because you'd have to go out and replace them. I guess that's why you'd rest them, so they'd last a while. A good horse will last about 10 years if you took care of it. Oh yeah, I could go on and on if I could think of everything.
Please do if you...
That's about all I can think of right now.
Okay. You were talking about replacements. How did you go about finding a replacement for a team?
Well, you'd either raise your own like you do a dairy heifer for your dairy herd, or you'd have to go to a neighbor that had an auction sale, or somebody else that had more colts that he had more replacements than he needed. You'd go there and get one, because most farmers had some mares around, and if they were good horses, they keep them bred, and so they would have replacements. The only thing is, when you had a mare that was bred or in foal, you couldn't work her, because you'd have to baby her along or not work her at all. So that's the way we got our replacements. And they really wasn't all that hard to find, because there's always a dealer around that would ship these horses in from all over the states. At one time they were even bringing in wild horses and putting them in corrals and taming them down, but I never wanted no part of that. So that's about all I can say.
What did you look for in a horse?
Oh, size and color, how healthy he was, and how short his hair was, and if he was an easy keeper or a hard keeper, how young he was. Everybody wanted a young horse, because a young horse was always worth 3 times what an old one was, what kind of step he had. You can tell a horse is gentle or not, just like you can tell anything else. You always had to have a horse that you could trust. What they call true blue. People had horses they didn't trust, they got rid of them. They'd sell them to the neighbor, but they'd usually tell the neighbor that if he'd run away with this or run away with that, and what they had to expect from the horse after they got him home. A lot of these horses was real good work horses, but you couldn't trust them. Some siren or something would go off, they'd be on their run. Them was usually the toughest horses. The horses that was always eager to run away was usually the toughest horses. You couldn't wear them out. The toughest horses that I ever drove was Arabian horses. They're the ones they were gray and they had a pink nose, they had a pink skin, and they were tougher than nails. They never seemed to get tired. And their disposition was good. And they always seemed to carry good flesh, which was important. Nobody wants to see a skinny horse, because the harnesses wouldn't fit on a skinny horse. You'd start out in the spring, and if his flesh would go up and down the minute you started working him, the same harness that you'd wear, you'd put on him in the spring would 3 weeks later it'd be too big for him. You'd have to adjust the harness. What was the question? What was that question that you wanted?
That I just asked you, or?
Yeah, that you just asked me.
I said, what do you look for in a horse?
Well, I think I'm pretty much covered it, didn't I? Or I think I said size and all that, and step. A lot of people wouldn't buy a horse unless it was the right color to fit in with their. And a lot of people would have a borderline horse, if it was a female, they just use it for more or less for breeding purposes to get a good colt out of her. And just because a horse would run away, then you could have two horses run away, and one horse was always ready to run away, but the other one wasn't. You know. But usually if one went, the other one went too. It had to. So go to the next question, Jeff.
Okay, that's good. How did you go about training a horse for a team or a team together? How was that accomplished?
Well, you'd usually start out with a colt about 2 years old. The biggest trouble with that was to put a harness on him, because he went kind of nutty when you first put the harness on him, because he never had a harness on him. And you'd usually hook him up with his mother in a wagon. Always preferred a long tongue in there, so he'd be on his side and the mother would be on her side. When you says, whoa, why, they'd stop or get up and they'd go. If she didn't go, the wagon would bump him in the rear. And he was always tied to her collar, so that if he decided to run by himself, why, she'd hold him back. And it was a chore. It took about a year to really get him so you could go out and cut corn with him. Corn binder usually make a lot of noise, and he was always kind of scared of that, because you'd get something that would rattle behind him, and a young horse, something rattling, he was always ready to take off. But you never broke two colts at once. You always took them one at a time. That's one thing I never liked to do, was break horses, because it was always a danger. He was always scared of getting trampled or pinched or something, or getting knocked down or walked on or something. And it was awful. Colts are awful unpredictable. You don't know whether they're going to go forward or backwards or sideways. I've never had a horse bite me, but a lot of them colts, they acted like they were ready to. Their ears was way back on the back of their head. And I've heard of horses biting somebody, but they never bit me. They usually... If a horse wants to bite, that's time to get rid of him. Some people might not agree with me, but I've seen it. So you ask me the next question, Jeff.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about how you train them?
Well, training a horse to pull is just like teaching a person that's deaf and dumb to write or read or answer the telephone or something. It's pretty hard to teach somebody something they can't talk. That's the way a horse is. You got to learn by. Well, they got to learn by hearing, I guess. That's about. Can't very well see because they got blinds on. When the mother goes, they go. So. Oh, I know. I learned from my dad what he used to do. I know if the harnesses got tore up, they got tore up when you was trying to break in a colt. That's that I know.
Okay. Could you just describe what could be done in one day with a team in the field?
Oh yeah, if you took and let's say you went out and plowed an acre. Acre was about all you could plow with a team of horses. That was just like that's where the measurement of the acre come about. They years ago that's all you could plow with was a team of oxen is what I think it's 43,000 some feet, and that's all about all you could plow with a team of oxen. That's where that word acre come about. And a good team of oxen would do just about what a good team of horses would do. And if you plowed an acre on a hot day, of course if it was cold like in the fall, you take in November, you could get a lot more work out of a team than you could in June or July, because in June and July you had this fly problem that was annoying all the time. And it was just a handicap to have heat and humidity and hot sun and all that, you know. And the heavier the load, the less you could do. But you could go out and do everything. You could cut hay and rake hay and cultivate. Sure, they had a small drill then. I guess it was an 11 or 12 or 11 drill. And you'd have to do everything with horses. Cut the corn with a corn binder and cut the grain with a grain binder. Haul it in. Haul the corn up to the corn husker. That's where the seasoned horses come in. You wanted to have seasoned horses where you could trust by any thrashing machine or corn husker, silo filler or anything that made a lot of noise. You didn't want no colts around there. But everything had to be done with horses. It usually got done. Didn't do much. The farms were small. Farms were small, and there was a lot of households around. You can just look up and down the road how many farms there was here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a farm about every 40, 50 acres, and 80 acres. 80 acres was a pretty good sized farm. But everything got done with horses. They'd even pull beats and haul it to town with a wagon and haul it to the 6 Mile Creek up here to the car, drive up alongside of the railroad car and pitch it all by hand into there. Of course, that was in the fall. It was cool. It was nice if you put 3-4 ton on the wagon. They didn't mind it too bad on the road after you got the load and got it out of the field. They'd walk right along there. I never hauled beets myself. I pulled a lot of beets. I pulled beets once in a field with boots halfway to my knees. Horses would go halfway to their knees in the mud. They done everything. Horses done everything. They'd cut the hay and then turn around and eat it. It's a lot of work caring for them. Yeah, another thing we used to do, I used to have this pea viner down the road here. And we'd have to cut peas when they were green. They were kind of hard to cut. One guy would be on the mower and one guy would have to walk behind the mower with a 3-tine fork and keep pulling off the cutter bar. It's heavy green. Then after we get it all mowed down, we'd have to go around with a wagon and load that heavy stuff on the wagon and haul it down to the pea viner. So that was hard work, especially it was usually peas was about ripe when it was the hottest day of the year. And we usually have one team cutting peas and the other team hauling it away. If you made 2 trips a day, you'd be about lucky, and it was only about 3 miles. Because usually when you got to the pea viner, you'd have to wait there. There was somebody always ahead of you. That usually come in time about the same time haying did. You didn't know whether to cut peas or do hay. What was the question again, Jeff?
What could be accomplished in one day with a team of horses?
Well, I guess I told you about plowing an acre. If you hauled in 5 loads of hay, that was a big job, big day's work, because you couldn't do it only till afternoon. That was quite a load for a team of horses. Pull a wagon and a hay loader behind it. But I guess it was better than pitching it on by hand. I've done that in my day too. Oh, you could probably plant about 10 acres of corn in a day if you had the corn planter set out wide for a wide road. Them days they didn't have any narrow rows, they all had wide 30, 40, or not 30, it's 40-inch rows. Now we got 28. The wider the row, the more you could cover the ground. Pulling them beets was heavy because you had to go so deep with that plow. You had to get under the beets to lift them out of the ground. What I didn't like about beets was after you pull them out, they had a tendency to freeze back in again. I never had to re-pull any of it. So I guess I say they'll do them day. The horse had to be you had to have a horse that would work anywhere or do anything. So I guess that about takes care of it. The horses had to raise the feed for the cows and so on. You had to have, that was your source of power. If you didn't have horses, you couldn't do anything. If you had a team of horses and had one that was sick, well, you couldn't pull anything with just one horse. You had to hurry up and find a second horse. Most of your tools were made for two horses. One horse was sick or died, well, you was just done, that's all.
Anything else you'd like to say about what could be done in one day?
What could be done in one day? Well, most of the days consisted of morning, afternoon, that's all. There was no night work. Probably drilled about 10 acres of oats in a day, that was about it. Problem you'd run in like cutting corn and be so wet in the fall that the corn binder would bog down. It'd be just like it is nowadays. When it's wet, it's wet. I remember we had to even cut corn by hand to fill the silo. It was too wet to pull a corn binder in the field. You'd have to cut corn about a good, if you had a good dry day, you could cut enough corn in a day to fill a silo. You didn't want to be driving through no mud hole. But you could go with horses where the tractor won't go. A lot of people probably won't believe that. But you could pull a load out of the field with a team of horses where the tractor, you wouldn't even begin to think of going with a tractor. And then we'd go in the woods, haul wood out of the woods for winter's fuel, haul it up to the house, fill the basement and the woodshed. Snowbanks didn't bother the horses. Horses would walk right through the snowbanks right to their belly, bringing the wood up in the wintertime. Horses never seemed to get stuck. If they got them on a load that they couldn't pull, well, you'd unhook them and come up with them. A lot of times you unhook a tractor and you still can't get home with it. Well, a lot of guys had horses too, just for show too. After the tractors come about, where they'd have use them, like they do now at these fairs, they just see how pretty they can make them look. But they'll do, horses were doing, they done everything. They planted the wheat and cut the wheat. Hauled all the manure out from the cows and from the stables and Well, it was hard in them days with horses too because we didn't have electric lights. Pretty hard to go out in the barn when it was dark or something and harness the horses without any electric lights. They were always dependable. We got everything done.
Okay, when I think of horses, I always think of horseshoes. Did you do the process of horseshoeing?
Well, I haven't, but I know all about it. I know there are several types of horseshoe. Horseshoe is it's used for traction of the horse so he won't fall down when it's icy. There's different kind of shoes. There's ice shoes, and then there's shoes, ordinary, regular shoes that they use for road work. They put it on a horse so that their feet won't break off too short. Some horses' feet are tender. It keeps breaking off, just like your fingernail. They keep it breaking off. Pretty soon you ain't got nothing. It starts bleeding. Some horses' feet was tough. You couldn't hurt them. They could walk on anything and it didn't hurt them. The only thing they couldn't walk on was ice. The shoes was made to protect the, more or less for traction, to protect the hoofs. You didn't want to wait too long, the hoof got too short. Well, then when you drive the nails in, you didn't dare drive it into the horse's foot. And you had to have, the hoof had to be long enough so it would take a nail. It had to be, the nail, the hoof had to be long enough so it wouldn't put the shoes on. I think shoes are all right on a horse. Like on the horse pulling, they use it for the nails was put into the 4 nails on each side of the shoe. I guess it didn't make any difference if it was a draft horse or a driving horse. Most of them that I ever saw was they had eight nails to the shoe, 4 on each side. I think some horses actually felt more sure-footed after you put shoes on them. You take and let them out in where it was slippery mud, and you could see that the ones without the shoes on were sliding around more than the ones that had shoes on. All your race horses today all got shoes on, and that tells you something. Just every Tom, Dick, and Harry can't put shoes on now. You gotta really have them. Can't put the shoes that are too heavy. You put too heavy shoes on a racehorse and it holds it down. Small horse usually takes a small shoe, lighter shoe. Some horses would kick the shoes off easier than others do. The way they walk, they half drag their feet around. I guess if you wanted to go to the Shiawassee River and start cutting ice like they used to 40, 50 years ago, or you'd have to have a horse and walk out there where you had to put the kind of shoes that would fit him so it wouldn't fall down. But cutting ice now, I guess, is something of the past. So I tell you, I guess they use horses for about anything. No matter if it was for cutting ice on a river or cutting corn in a muddy field, they done everything.
With the horseshoes, did anything ever get caught in the horseshoes?
Well, not really, unless they kind of hocked around and cut his own leg. Stones would kind of pack up into the hoofs, and didn't bother the shoes much. It was always on the side of the shoe. And get the right size stone up in the hoof after been some time after. It usually didn't get in there right away after the shoes was put on, where the feet were cleaned out in the bottom, but after the hoof started to kind of growing in and then make a small place for a stone to get in there. It would wedge in there, and then you had to lift the horse's foot up and get a hoof knife and dig it out if you're lucky enough to find it. If it drove up far enough, it would cause an infection. We've never had to take the shoe off to get the stone out. It didn't happen all that much. Well,